Friday, everyone. Welcome to the very last P3 Strategy Series event of the year. Come on up. We have a whole bunch of seats at the front. I know I just told you to come on up, but there's also a hot cocoa bar in the back and snacks if you haven't gotten stuck yet. So have at it. We also have a bunch of Sunstone swag over here. So after this event, please take some because we have so many. I would like to highlight these adorable little Sunstone stress balls. They have Sunstone printed on the butt. So if you're stressed during your holiday season, seeing your family, too much ham, I don't know, you can check it on the wall and it'll help you feel better. All right, so here we have a very special guest today. Before I call Mr. Aldo Cervantes from the City of Lakewood to the stage, a little bit of background as always. So when we are decking the halls with P3 collaboration, this event is hosted by Sunstone Cities. If you haven't heard of Sunstone Cities does a lot of economic development consulting. We work closely with public-private partnerships. So if you are looking for public infrastructure financing solutions or staff augmentation, or you just want a government connection, we can help you out. And of course, you can always scan the QR code. It'll come up in just a second. Scan the QR code, follow us on LinkedIn, and reach out to any of us. If you have questions about Sunstone Cities in general, or you just want to get to know any of our upcoming events, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Jennifer, or any of our staff. All right, now, without further ado, the amazing guest you've all been waiting for, Aldo Cervantes. Welcome to the stage, please.
Thank you. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aldo Cervantes. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Lakewood. A little bit of background before I get started with the presentation. I've been with the City of Lakewood since January of this year as a director. Prior to Lakewood, I was with the City of San Gabriel as a director. I was there for about 3 years and a month, so a little over 3 years. Prior to the City of San Gabriel, I was with the City of San Marino for about 18 years, kind of bouncing between the assistant planner position all the way up to the director of development for that city as well. And so, been with Lakewood for about a year or so, working mostly with the ADU projects, the SB9 projects, but a little background on my experience with development. Mostly came with the City of San Gabriel, with how you sort of visualize the built environment. I worked a lot with mixed-use developments. I worked with a hotel chain in the City of San Gabriel. But going even further back, working with the City of San Marino, I helped with the expansion project for the Huntington Library property. And so that kind of gives you guys a little bit of my experience with respect to sort of the built environment process. So the agenda for this afternoon really is going to be focusing on the Lakewood Mall, the Lakewood Center. We're very excited to work with our new partners with the Lakewood Mall. If you heard the news, Pacific Retail Capital has purchased the mall as early as this past August. Prior to Pacific Retail purchasing the property, we were working with Macerich, who owned the property for many, many years. The other piece of the agenda is really the role of housing, not only throughout the City of Lakewood, but how it affects the future planning or redevelopment of the Lakewood Mall site. And then we'll finish off with sort of the what we call the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, or EFID, and how that is going to play a role with sort of shaping the mall itself as well as the surrounding Lakewood infrastructure. So I'd be remiss not to give a shout out, of course, to Sunstone and John and his team. They are assisting us currently with the process of putting together the City of Lakewood's first ever economic development strategic plan. And as I talk this afternoon about the Lakewood Mall, sort of have in the back of your mind kind of Sunstone playing a key role as to how sort of we work with the EFID funding process, how we sort of manage development of the mall itself. I know John is currently helping us with a watch party for the World Cup, so we're looking at sort of how that's going to shape how we use the property as well. So the first topic of conversation is really the partnership that we developed with Pacific Retail Capital Partners. The investor group that's tied to Pacific Retail is Lions Livings, which is primarily a housing development developer, as well as Silver Peak. I put into the spreadsheet or into the PowerPoint a statement that was made by the Pacific Retail Capital Group. I won't read it out loud, but really what they are looking at doing is creating a vibrant, new, modern age mall atmosphere. And if you take a look at the map, this is not your traditional mall property. We have a Costco, there's a Target, there's Macy's, there's a JCPenney's, 24 Hour Fitness, there's a grocer on property, but the yellow depicts really what we call the super block. But the mall actually owns north of Candlewood, which is labeled in green or highlighted in green, which we call Restaurant Row on Candlewood. It includes Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, and a variety of other types of restaurant uses. So, there's about 150 acres of property here, not only the super block, but also what you see highlighted in green above on Candlewood. This is what we call the Lakewood Center. And this is really what Pacific Retail has to play with respect to the modernization of the mall site, as well as, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the introduction of housing on this property. So some of the initial conversations we've been having with the mall, and of course I can't really divulge a lot into this process because number one, they just purchased the property in August, and so there's a lot of moving parts. But some of the conversations that we're having so far are really just kind of conceptual at this point. And so really what Pacific Retail is looking to do with the mall site, conceptually, at least at this point, is looking to create, I'll go back to the aerial, it's really looking to, there's a slight delay in that. It is looking to create more of a walkability or sort of connectivity within the mall itself. City Hall is actually across the street from the mall, and even though we're so close to the shopping center or the mall, we don't really walk across the street to get into the mall because there's really the lack of connectivity at the moment. But Pacific Retail Group is looking to make those improvements to ensure that this is a walkable site. Not only walkable, but looking to introduce new retail opportunities, restaurant uses, residential uses, as well as what really I'm excited about, and I'll talk about this later on, is really entertainment and open space opportunities for the property. So along with that, our strategy with the new mall owners is really to keep them really close to us. And what that means is having that constant conversation, the dialogue, keeping that open. If they need anything, we're there to assist. I actually took an email on my way here asking to jump on a call at 4:30. And I said, let's do it. Let's jump on a Teams call at 4:30 and let's talk about what you guys need from us. And so that's really what I mean by keeping the mall folks really close to us. But also equally as important to keeping the mall and their folks close to the city staff is we found it important for our strategy to really understand what the built environment can look like for the Lakewood Center. And we did a little bit of our own due diligence. We took a visit to the Bray Mall, and we talked to a council member as well as their director at that city. And we had an opportunity to really ask them questions about, look, what went right and what went wrong with that development. And those who don't understand what's going on with Bray Mall is they essentially are modernizing the southern part of that mall by sort of creating residential spaces. There is a new gym that's being built as part of the project. There's outdoor gathering spaces as well. And one of the things that we found interesting in that conversation, and this ties back to our EFID process, is they actually worked with the mall ownership, the city and the mall ownership, to create agreements or some kind of development agreements that allow for the mall to utilize these newly developed open spaces for city events. And so that definitely is going to help shape how the city feels the Lakewood Mall should sort of move in that same direction. So again, keeping the mall folks really close to us. When they need something, we're there. We're ready to have a conversation to make sure that they understand really what our needs are as well. And so the role with housing, and this is, the sort of the driving force, I would say, with respect to how the mall kind of sees itself being played out in the next couple of years. Part of the housing element, and those of you who don't know what the housing element is sort of a long-term strategy for every city on how they want to develop housing strategies for the city. And so in respect of Lakewood, we actually brought in Macerich when they owned the property in 2021 to say, hey, Macerich, we want to partner with you. You have a very large site with a lot of potential. Let's figure out a way where we can utilize your property to satisfy some of our RENA allocations or our housing obligations by the state. And so they played ball, and through the planning process of that housing element, we were able to identify various sites throughout that property where we could put housing on the site. And this is a variety of different types of housing types. So it's whether it's apartment complexes or complex or a townhome type development, it was all up for grabs for us to play with the property. And so with respect to the housing elements, we were able to demonstrate that there's enough land on the property suitable for housing to accommodate up to 1,000 units. And so when Pacific Retail purchased the property, they were following along with that same strategy. They were, let's do it. We want housing on this property. We know that that's the way of the future for large properties such as the mall, and we're all in on this. And so another good example of sort of that collaboration and partnership with the mall ownership, we also brought them to the table with respect to what we call the mixed-use overlay process. And that was a critical component to not only the housing element, but really putting a policy in place to entice investment, to entice developers to put in actual housing on the property. And it really set the stage for developing those standards that are needed for housing projects at the mall. And so things such as height requirements, parking requirements, and one of the great things that Lakewood did for that mixed-use development or mixed-use overlay was they did not place a cap on density, nor did they place a minimum on density. So the mall itself is really just looking at sort of a clean slate for developing housing on the property. So we thought that was a good advantage and benefit for us and for them as well. So we recently, the council actually adopted this infrastructure tool, what's called an enhanced infrastructure financing district. And what this essentially is a mechanism that the city can use to sort of pull together tax funding through various districts throughout the city. So we can pull these funds into one fund to use towards a variety of different types of projects. Those projects look like infrastructure related, they are affordable housing related, but what we can do with those funds is we can leverage sort of private construction projects by paying for those infrastructure related projects, allowing the developer to use more of their funds towards improving the site. Another thing that we're having early discussions with the mall on is the use of the funding for affordable housing, as that's another obligation of our housing requirements. One of the things that I found interesting in some of our early conversations with the mall was, can we use these funds for outdoor spaces, outdoor community spaces? And the answer is yes, but it depends. And so we're now having those conversations with the mall to say, okay, when it comes down to our master planning for the site, how can we bring in this fund source so we can kind of create these outdoor spaces? Because we feel that that's going to be an important element, amenity for ourselves and also for the mall as they move forward. And so one of the things I'll say about thinking out of the box here, because our infrastructure, our enhanced infrastructure financing district is fairly new. We haven't started collecting on the fund. So at this point, we don't have any funds available until until the increment grows and the years progress with this EFID. So we're gonna have to be very creative with how we manage the use of the funding, because there really isn't that much in there at the moment. And so we have to sort of think out of the box in terms of, okay, well, how can we make this funding available to the mall where sort of it lines up with their sort of goals of completing certain projects, and us having a certain amount of funding available to provide that funding for them. So we're currently thinking about how to do that at the moment. There are a variety of tools that we can use to sort of advance, have them advance the project and us sort of reimburse them as we get funding along the way. So there's a whole lot of things that we can think of to sort of help with this project and help with the infrastructure with the future development of the mall site. I did include a couple of images. The image to the far left on the very top is a potential development for the Santa Ana Mall. You'll notice they're incorporating, although it's a small image, they're incorporating housing into the property. Down south is Laguna Hills. You can see a huge amount of open space into the project as well as housing. I don't remember the other location, but if you can see, vibrancy is really the key thing here. And this is what's inspiring the future development of the Lakewood Center, so that we can all enjoy it. It's going to attract from the region, not just from Lakewood. And I've heard talks of South Coast Plaza as being an inspiration as well, in terms of the luxury and living and retail, that sort of thing. So a lot of good things coming along our way at the City of Lakewood, and Sunstone will be there right next to us to help us develop a lot of these strategies. Again, I'll be remiss not to say Cosmont is also in the room, kind of helping us out with this stuff as well. Cosmont was instrumental in getting us the EFID funding process underway. So, and a lot of you guys likely be in the same kind of conversations of helping us out with kind of seeing this as a reality for the City of Lakewood, and also for the mall itself. So with that said, I think I went over. Maybe there's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me. I do have a cell phone number. If you're interested in getting my cell phone number, we can use that. I work best with texting, so if you want to give me a call, I'll share my number and we can have a conversation thereafter. So open for questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Aldo. Such a perfect example, not just conceptually, of public-private partnership. You've got a private developer who bought private property, 125 to 150 acres at the center of your city. And you've got the government on a day-to-day basis partnering with the private sector to vision, design, change even the land use, the zoning, to transform a community. This is a perfect example of a P3. And then this innovative financing structure, where you're going to combine potentially the public, the government, helping to finance some of those open spaces and that public infrastructure to support private development. I mean, this is exactly the kind of stuff that we love to learn about and talk about. So the one last thing I'll say is amazing. How many of your own city government officials say, hey, I'm better by text, here's my cell phone number. I got a call on the way down, and right after this I'm going to jump on a 4:30 because they need something. That is the kind of person, not just that Aldo is, but I think I've worked with over the years in government that are so accessible, they're so up for partnership and collaboration, and yet that story very rarely gets told. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. I want you to think of your questions because the group oftentimes, this is their chance to ask you a little bit about it. But just backing up a little bit, you've had a lot of different cities and projects in your career. How does this compare? The redevelopment of the Lakewood Mall, which is famous nationally as one of the first outdoor malls. How does this compare for you? And tell us about that.
Well, it was really one of the reasons why I went to Lakewood. So San Marino was great, and it's a veteran community, a lot of residential projects. The Huntington Library expansion was a good experience for me. and that included an environmental impact report. And so there's a lot of geeking out on the planning side of things, to just put it that way. Moving on to San Gabriel, where it was sort of that cookie cutter mixed use type development, working with a hotel and that sort of thing. And that is sort of I would say the norm. If you drive around Irvine, you see a lot of that. But I never had, although I did work for Cerritos, they have a mall. I worked for Montebello. This is when I was an intern. They have a mall as well. As an intern, you don't get to play in that pool, right? And I just went to the mall to get coffee for my director. That's kind of what my role was. But Lakewood, what attracted me to Lakewood a year ago was an opportunity to working with, at the time Macerich and that ownership, now with Pacific Retail, to really, put my footprint into the future development of the site. And I was a part of an interview that was put in place by the mall folks to interview myself, residents, and a lot of the other executive team to really define what that mall can be. What kind of uses are great for the mall, given my experiences. What do you think about the housing part of the mall? What kind of businesses should we be looking at, attracting? So that is why Lakewood is the place that I choose to be currently, and really for a long time, because I want to help shape such a unique property, and really, after I'm done, in legacy perspective, say, look, I had some influence with that property.
That's fantastic. Well, so I kind of went after the stereotype of government being inaccessible a few minutes ago, but what about the stereotype that the private sector, these developers, they're all just greedy and they're all just trying to get as much as they can get? What's the actual partnership look like?
Yeah, and actually, I had a meeting yesterday with a developer. Just similar to today, I drove from Lakewood to meet them here in Irvine, and we were talking about another property that they're interested in working with, and we talked about what other properties are available similar to the one they're looking at now, and how they can sort of make that work on the housing front. And so, for me personally, I hold it to my own standard to work with anyone to fulfill obligations for housing, because in my own world, personally, I think housing is very important, and having a good amount of housing types or opportunities to me is critical. And so whatever I can do to help facilitate that, whether through jumping on 4:30 calls on the day of, or driving down to Irvine to sort of have these meetings to facilitate ideas on what we can do with respect to housing and development in the city. So that's sort of a personal goal for me to be that person, but also I find it exciting. I haven't been in the world of economic development for a long time. I've been mostly on the planning world. I've been a building official for a number of years. I've been a code enforcement officer, and it's only been about 5 years since I've been in economic development, and it really is because of the people-to-people, the face-to-face interactions is really what I enjoy doing. It's really why I can jump on a call at 4:30. I can visit these developers. I can jump on a call or a Teams meeting to say, look, what do you guys need from us? I'm a resource for you.
Yeah. Well, it's super interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Lakewood. The city of Lakewood. This is a generational project.
Right.
But Lakewood also was a really innovative city in government, going back to the 50s and 60s, post World War II, because they started something called a contract city, a contracted city form of government. And the Lakewood plan was a really revolutionizing kind of structure for government, where the city, from an efficiency standpoint, partners with both the private sector and with other government sectors to provide services. Could you talk about what makes Lakewood unique, and that they continue to seem to innovate, and the Lakewood plan, that structure? What have you learned from that?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of I guess from the housing front. I know we keep talking about housing, but there's a little bit of pushback right now with respect to talk about the ADUs and the SB9s, and we recognize that state is really pushing this on local jurisdictions, not just Lakewood. And so there's a bit of an identity crisis at the moment with wanting to keep that single family fabric, but knowing that there's this outside entity, telling us you've got to build housing, and that's in the form of ADUs. And so that's, Lakewood has an opportunity here, not just to say, okay, we're going to just accept the model that's given to us by the state, but we're trying to think out of the box with respect to, okay, how do we, if we're being mandated these housing projects, how do we make those projects our own? How do we decrease the potential impacts of those housing projects? And so through policy decisions, through talking with councils, and talking with like you, John, and Ken from Cosmont, is we need to think out of the box to make sure that single family community atmosphere that we have in Lakewood is somewhat still maintained, regardless of the mall doing this development, which if anyone knows Lakewood, it is a very larger bedroom type community, and we have our traditional shopping centers at every intersection. And we have a very large piece of property known as the Lakewood Mall. So it's a very unique city. And we want to make sure that we can sort of maintain a lot of that family type atmosphere, but at the same time understanding that we have certain obligations, we have opportunities as well. And so really where we think out of the box in terms of future development of the property is through policy decisions.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of people are thinking about the size of this project, again, this partnership where the city and the community are saying, hey, we're open to change and transformation. 125 acres right in the middle of our city, and they're willing to do these mixed uses. So do you even know how much did Pacific Retail pay for this piece of property?
I have no idea.
But their willingness to come in. So let's talk about that. So now we're talking about P3. So the government is obviously plays a big role in what you can build there. But Pacific Retail spent a lot of money to buy this from Macerich, and they're going to change it a lot. But you hold a lot of keys in terms of profitability and making sure that this is successful. So what are the things that you've found in working with the private sector, from your perspective of government, what are those keys to unlock the most private investment and opportunity for private investment in your city?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that comes from kind of the grassroots effort of just, and I mentioned this in my presentation, is keeping really close contacts with the ownership or the property owners of these commercial properties. For example, with Pacific Retail, we actually meet with them every week, and that's by design, because we want them to feel as if we're a partner with this project. And when it comes to utilizing the EFID funding or the infrastructure funding, they will know that we are there as a resource, and we will be able to sort of figure out a way to fund the project somewhat, whether it's infrastructure or affordable housing. So the best way of sort of to answer that question is understanding who your audience is, and that's the development community, the ownership community. And really, sharing, for lack of a better way of saying it, sharing my cell phone number, saying, look, you can call me at any point, and we can talk about, ideas and solutions, or talk about the issues that you're facing. I see myself as a resource for that community, and so I want to make sure that I can portray that. If there's need to have conversations about what can I do with the mall in terms of housing or any other property in the city, I want to make sure that they know that they can reach out to me, and we can have that conversation.
Well, it sounds so. There's a couple of things that I'm hearing in themes then for other communities, other cities that are trying to unlock investment. So number one, having an opportunity like this and marketing that to the world, saying here's our vision, here's what we need to do and want to do here. We're open for change and we're open for business. Number two is changing the rules around what can be done there. So you changed, how high they can build, how much density they can build, the types. It's not just restaurants. Now they can build housing. So changing the rules so that it makes that opportunity available. And then three, it looks like co-investing, saying we're willing to invest. We're willing to match you with some of your investment in this infrastructure. If you can share and partner, we, the city, are going to put money into this. How much, with the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, how much money is Lakewood right now sort of committing to co-invest with Pacific Retail?
Yeah, we haven't really come up with a number yet.
Okay.
And so because the project at the mall is so new, we haven't even discussed master planning of the property. And so we haven't really determined where the specific land uses are going to be, whether it's open space, residential, commercial, modernizing the mall itself as you know it. And so because we don't know the scope of the work yet, we don't know how much we can invest on our end to help them.
Yeah, and this is one of these really, really cool tools. So we need to have Larry Cosmont or maybe Ken on the stage in the new year, maybe in January, February, to talk about it, because I know Larry has been one of those leaders and visionaries statewide to help create these kind of sophisticated public financing tools. Let's tell the group a little bit about how these work. So you've drawn an area around this big project, and you've established how much property tax it's earning right now. So maybe it's, let's say it's $2 million or $3 million. And by attracting this investment and co-investing, maybe the value of that property increases. And so the property tax that now it's generating per year, it's $2 or $3 million, maybe $4 or $5 million a year. So you guys are using that extra $2 to $3 million a year through the incremental growth, growth in the property tax. Do you issue debt? Do you just put that $2 to $3 million a year into the project? How are you thinking about using this tax increment financing structure to really build this stuff?
Yeah, so we also want to be cognizant of our other commercial properties. And as John mentioned, the mall is within the district, with the EFID district, but we also identified other shopping centers in the district. So we want to be very careful in terms of, taking the mall and saying, okay, you're going to get the entire pot of money.
Yeah.
There are other projects or other commercial property owners with vibrant shopping centers that also need the money. And they may be considering a redevelopment of their properties as well. And whether through housing, incorporating housing, or just modernization of their shopping centers. And so we have to be very careful and cognizant of how do we use the money and really spread it across fairly.
Okay, so that's something we all want to watch, because I think a lot of the people who are here and watch our P3 strategy series, they're looking at how could I use this maybe, for my city or for my region. So then, when, let's say a couple years down the road, there's more property tax and the city's making investments. So it could be within just the mall area. You're saying in the enhanced infrastructure financing district, it could be in other areas of the city. You could do sidewalk, landscape. Is it only public infrastructure, or maybe you could use those funds for services, or there's other things you can do?
Right, and so we think of the funding to be more of an infrastructure related.
Okay.
So we're doing the right of ways, sidewalks, but one of the interesting things in talking to Pacific Retail is, based off their experiences, is using the funding to create these public outside gathering spaces. So if there's a public benefit, although the site's on private property, if there's a public benefit to the site, similar to what Brea had done in their agreement, although they did theirs with a development agreement, we're kind of looking at the same sort of strategy for the mall. And that's why I was saying, coming up with out-of-the-box ways of using the fund. But we can use it towards affordable housing. And so there's kind of the thought process right now is really infrastructure driven, as well as because we have a RENA allocation for affordable housing, using it towards paying for that type of development. Going back to the last question, Lakewood has begun to see the investment in housing over the last year. Prior to this last year, Lakewood has not experienced the type of growth that we're experiencing now, not only with the mall, but we at the council meeting this past Tuesday, we had 3 housing projects. Well, Lakewood has not seen that level of investment in a very long time. And we have 3 more projects in the next year that we did not sort of foresee. One of them is 388 unit apartment complex on Carson.
Wow.
So we did not imagine that was going to happen, but now it's happening. And so going back to the use of the funding, well, we need to really understand, what is the forecast for us in terms of housing projects, because we just started collecting on the fund. And so because of that, it's going to take us at least a few years to have a good amount of money in the fund to not only fund the mall in terms of their projects, but also funding these other projects that really we don't realize they're coming.
Yeah.
And if we do realize they're coming, what is their fair share?
Yeah, that's great. Well, and we're going to transition to some questions from the group now. One last question or point that we could talk. This is the kind of exciting, the light bulbs go off for me, because sometimes the only answer is that government needs to raise taxes and generate revenue and use that to do stuff. In this case, it looks like by creating this special district, the private sector investment is going to help increase the value as well as the public investment, but you're not raising taxes. There's no new taxes here. It's just the same taxes on a more valuable asset or a more valuable property.
Right.
So I think it's really exciting, because these are the ways that we can actually generate more tax revenue without raising taxes. Isn't that interesting? And that the general fund taxpayer, maybe the resident of Lakewood or the visitor of Lakewood, they're not paying any more taxes, but because of the increase in the value, there actually are more tax revenues. It's really, really, really creative stuff,
Right.
and a truly a partnership between public and private. What else would you say about this, and just in terms of advice to other city officials who, I know this is always a question on the council floor. Should we raise taxes to do this thing? This seems like a much better way to do stuff.
Yeah, and one could argue that this is sort of another form of redevelopment funding. It is a funding that's available, although redevelopment is no longer an option for us. It is another tool, a financial tool that we can use to sort of leverage construction projects by paying for those needed infrastructure improvements. And really infrastructure, when I meant right of way, that can be streets and sidewalks, but also what's underground. And that's sewer lines, water lines, all those utilities that also need to be upgraded. And so when the city is able to put a large amount of funding into those types of improvements, well, that's going to just give a lot more funding for the developer to do better things for the property. And so that's kind of what we've learned by and again, we're fairly green at the EFID stuff, and we're learning every day. And I mentioned we don't have the funding yet in the fund, so we're going to be gathering those funds as the years progress. And there's a lot of learning involved in this from myself as well, and even from our city officials, because it's a fairly new funding source for us. And so as we progress along, we'll need the expertise of John and Larry and Ken to say, hey, think out of the box. How can you take advantage of this EFID funding despite not having the amount that you need, and what can we do? And so and there's all kinds of things you can do as we're kind of realizing that. For your city officials who either you work for or you work with, don't be so concerned about it being such a new tool. Take a deep dive and just learn from it. Probably have study sessions with your council members and say, look, this is what we found that's out in the community as a funding source. Let's just have a conversation and let the policy decision makers say, okay, well, this is not for us, or let's try this out. So it's always an education, and we want to make sure we educate our policy decision makers, council members, planning commissioners, that there are other tools out there that we can utilize for leveraging projects, as we're all going to need to do that as housing projects or housing mandates continue to grow for us.